Hi there. Tonight we slip into the muddy, candlelit world of a medieval village, where you're a young woman about to face the most daunting night of your life, your wedding night. Picture yourself standing in a cramped, thatch-roofed cottage, the air thick with the scent of damp wool and smoky tallow candles. Outside, the village hums with chatter, and you can't shake the feeling that everyone's talking about you. Your stomach churns as you adjust a scratchy linen shift, your best garment, though it's patched at the elbows. This isn't the fairy tale wedding of modern dreams, oh, no. You probably won't survive this without a few awkward moments that'll haunt you for years. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'd love to know where you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in the heart of your village, a cluster of wattle and daub houses huddled around a rutted dirt path. It's late spring, and the air carries the faint sweetness of blooming hawthorn, though it's undercut by the ever-present stench of the nearby midden heap. Your wedding is tomorrow, and the village is already buzzing like a hive of slightly drunk bees. You catch snippets of conversation as you haul a bucket of water from the well. She's marrying the miller's son. Lucky girl, one woman mutters, while another snorts. Lucky. He's got a temper and a wandering eye. You try to ignore them, but their words cling like damp straw to your skirts. This is no private affair. Your wedding night is the village's entertainment, and you're the unwitting star in medieval Europe. Marriage was less about love and more about survival, alliances, land, and labor. Historians note that by the 13th century, the Catholic Church had tightened its grip on matrimony, declaring it a sacrament, which meant your wedding wasn't just a party but a sacred contract. You're not marrying for a sparkly ring or a Pinterest board. You're tying your family's fortunes to another's, and everyone's watching to see if you'll fumble the knot. A quirky tidbit: some villagers believed a bride who tripped on her way to the church was cursed with bad luck, so you're hyper-aware of every pebble underfoot. Historians still argue whether this superstition was widespread or just a regional quirk. But you're not taking chances. You pause by the well, the wooden bucket heavy in your hands, and glance at your reflection in the water. Your face is flushed from the day's chores, milking the cow, kneading dough, and dodging your mother's endless advice about wifely duties. The village is small, maybe 200 souls, and privacy is a fantasy. You share your cottage with your parents, 2 younger siblings, and a particularly grumpy goat who chews your straw mattress. The idea of your wedding night being intimate feels like a cruel jest. You overhear a gaggle of older women cackling about the bedding ceremonies. That's a thing, and it's as intrusive as it sounds. They'll escort you to the marriage bed, and you're already dreading their lewd jokes. Let's be real. You're exhausted. You've been up since dawn, and the sun's barely dipped below the horizon. Your hands are rough from spinning wool, and your back aches from hauling firewood. Yet the village expects you to be a blushing bride, radiant, and ready for a night that's more about duty than desire. You smirk, thinking how modern folks would lose it if their wedding included a public inspection of the bedsheets. Spoiler, that's coming, and it's not as romantic as it sounds. For now, you trudge back to the cottage, water sloshing in the bucket, and try to tune out the village's gossip. They're betting on whether you'll cry tomorrow or manage a brave face as you step inside. Your mother's already fussing, piling more tasks on you before the big day. She's muttering about the dowry of few chickens, a bolt of coarse cloth, and a wobbly stool your father carved. You're not nobility. This isn't a Game of Thrones style union with gold and knights. You're a peasant, and your marriage is a practical deal to keep the village's web of obligations intact. Still, there's a flicker of excitement beneath your nerves. Maybe, just maybe, this new life won't be as grim as the rumors suggest. But then you hear a neighbor shout about the groom's drinking habits, and your heart sinks. Welcome to the medieval marriage game, where the stakes are high and the wine is watered down. You're back in your family's cottage, the air heavy with the scent of boiled cabbage and the faint tints of sweat-soaked wool. The fire crackles weakly, casting shadows on the rough walls, and you're perched on a stool, trying to mend a tear in your shift while your mother drones on about tomorrow's wedding. Your mind, though, is elsewhere, specifically on the fact that this marriage was decided when you were barely old enough to chase chickens. You're not stepping into this union out of some grand romance. You're here because a deal was struck years ago, and you're just now catching up to its consequences. The village's chatter from earlier, remember that well-side gossip, still stings. But now you're piecing together how little choice you had in this whole affair. In medieval times, betrothals were often arranged when children were young, sometimes even infants, to secure alliances or property. By the 14th century, canon law required both parties to consent at the altar. But let's be honest, saying no wasn't exactly an option when your family's survival hinged on the match. You're 16, maybe 17, and the miller's your soon-to-be husband was chosen because his family owns a strip of land next to yours. It's not love, it's logistics, a quirky tidbit. Some betrothals included a hand-fasting ritual, where you'd clasp hands through a hole in a stone to seal the deal. You didn't get that ceremony, but the weight of the agreement feels like a stone on your chest anyway. Historians still argue whether hand-fasting was legally binding or just symbolic. But for you, it's all the same. You're bound. You set the needle down, your fingers sore from stitching, and glance at your younger sister, who sprawled on a pallet, oblivious to the storm brewing in your head. She's lucky. She's got a few years before her own betrothal comes knocking. You, on the other hand, are staring down the barrel of a life you didn't choose. Your mother's still talking, something about how the miller's son is sturdy enough, which is medieval code for he's not dead yet. You bite back a laugh joke, number one. If sturdy is the best compliment, you're in for a thrilling marriage. The truth is, you've barely spoken to him. He's a blurry figure in your mind, all flour-dusted hands and a grunt when you pass him at the market. The cottage door creaks open, and your father stomps in, tracking mud across the packed earth floor. He's been at the alehouse, negotiating with the groom's family, and his red face tells you it wasn't all friendly banter. Betrothals, like yours, often came with tense haggling land tools, or even a pig could tip the scales. You're not just marrying a man. You're merging two households, and every detail had to be ironed out before the priest got involved. You catch your father muttering about the miller's stingy offer, and your stomach twists. If they're already fighting, what's your wedding night going to feel like? You're not naive. You know this night isn't about candles and sweet nothings. It's about sealing the deal, and the village expects proof. You stand, stretching your aching back, and step outside for a moment of air. The night is cool, stars pricking the sky, but the village isn't asleep. You hear laughter from the alehouse, a dog barking, and the distant clink of a blacksmith still at work. This place never really quiets down, and neither does your mind. You think about the stories you've heard, whispers of brides who cried through their wedding nights, Or worse, ones who didn't make it through childbirth a year later. You're not sure what scares you more, the night itself or the life that follows. Joke number 2. At least if the groom's drunk tomorrow, he might fall asleep before you have to deal with him. Your mother calls you back inside, her voice sharp with impatience. She's holding a comb, ready to attack the tangles in your hair, as if that'll make you a proper bride. You sit, wincing as she tugs, and try to focus on the fire's glow. The betrothal's terms are setland, a few coins, and your labor as a wife. You're not just gaining a husband, you're losing the sliver of freedom you had as a daughter. The church might call this a sacred union, but to you, it feels like a contract written in someone else's hand. Tomorrow, you'll walk to the church, and the village will watch every step. For now, you're just a girl in a cottage, wondering how you ended up here. You're back in the cottage, the fire now a dull glow, and your mother's comb is still waging war on your hair. The air feels thicker, not just from the smoke, but from the weight of what's coming. Yesterday's village gossip and last night's realization about your betrothal, remember that stone on your chest feeling, have left you restless. Now, as dawn creeps through the cracks in the shutters, you're caught up in the next piece of this medieval marriage puzzle, the dowry. Your family's been haggling over it for weeks, and you're starting to feel less like a bride and more like a bundle of goods being bartered. You sit cross-legged on the floor, sorting through a pile of linens your mother insists are part of the deal, while your father paces, muttering about the miller's latest demands. In medieval Europe, a dowry was the bride's contribution to the marriage, often a mix of practical items: cloth, pots, livestock, and sometimes land or coin. By the 13th century, it was a cornerstone of marriage negotiations, especially for families like yours, scraping by in a village where wealth meant an extra goat. Your dowry isn't glamorous: a few chickens, a patch blanket, and that wobbly stool your father keeps boasting about. A quirky tidbit: some dowries included bedding rights, meaning your family promised the groom a share of your household's straw mattress luxury, medieval style. Historians still argue whether dowries empowered women by giving them leverage or just turned them into bargaining chips. But you're leaning toward the latter as your father snaps at you to fold the linens faster. You glance at the pile, your hands moving mechanically. Each item feels like a piece of your old life being traded away. The chickens, they're the ones you've fed since you were a kid, clucking at you every morning. The blanket, you helped your mother weave it during a winter so cold your fingers bled. You're not just bringing stuff to this marriage, you're bringing your family's survival, and the miller's family knows it. You overhear your father grumble about their demand for an extra bushel of barley, and you can't help but smirk. Joke number 1. If they're this picky about grain, imagine how they'll judge your cooking. The truth is, these negotiations are a power play, and you're the prize. Nobody asked if you wanted to be one. Your mother, sensing your distraction, hands you a small iron pot, another dowry item, and tells you to scrub it clean. You dunk it in a bucket of cold water, the chill biting your knuckles, and try to focus. The village outside is waking up. You hear the creak of a cart, the bleat of a sheep, and the distant clang of the church bell signaling morning prayers. The dowry talks aren't just about youth, they're about keeping the village's delicate balance intact. If your family gives too much, they'll starve come winter. If they give too little, the miller might call off the wedding and you'll be stuck, a spinster at 17. Which is basically a death sentence in a world where marriage means security. You pause, the pot dripping in your hands, And think about the groom. You've seen him at the mill, his face smudged with flour, but you don't know him. Is he kind? Cruel? Does he even want this marriage? Or is he just following his father's orders? The dowry makes you feel like a transaction, and you wonder if he feels the same. Joke number 2. Maybe you should have negotiated for a better groom instead of an extra chicken. Your mother catches your frown and snaps that you're lucky to marry at all. Plenty of girls end up with worse. She's not wrong, but it doesn't make the knot in your stomach loosen as you scrub the pot. Your father slams his hand on the table, startling your sister who's been dozing by the fire. He's furious the miller's family wants a share of your family's meadow, a strip of land you've grazed cows on forever. You freeze, realizing this isn't just about chickens anymore. That meadow is your family's lifeline, and giving it up could mean lean years ahead. You're not just carrying a dowry into this marriage, you're carrying your family's future. The village will talk if the deal falls through, and you'll be the girl who couldn't seal the bargain. You set the pot down, your hands trembling, and try to imagine the wedding day. It's tomorrow, and the dowry's still not settled. Welcome to the medieval marriage market, where love's the last thing on anyone's mind. You're standing outside the cottage, the morning sun barely warming the damp air, as your mother drags you toward a tub of lukewarm water behind a flimsy screen of woven branches. The dowry haggling, remember that meadow your father nearly lost, is still unresolved, but today's the wedding, and there's no time to dwell. Your stomach's in knots, not just from nerves, but from the meager porridge you choked down at dawn. Now you're being scrubbed like a tarnished pot, your mother's hands relentless with a coarse cloth. This is the start of your bridal preparations, and it's less about beauty and more about making you presentable for the village's prying eyes. You wince as she tugs at your hair, muttering about how you should have taken better care of it. In medieval Europe, bridal preparations were practical, not glamorous, especially for peasants like you. By the 14th century, a bride was expected to look clean and modest, signaling her family's respectability. You're not getting a spa day, you're getting a quick dunk and a borrowed dress. A quirky tidbit: some villagers believed washing a bride's feet brought fertility, so your mother's splashing water on your toes with a zeal that's frankly alarming. Historians still argue whether this foot washing was a widespread custom or just a quirky local tradition, but you're too cold to care. You just want this over with. The water's gritty, probably from the same well you hold buckets from yesterday, and you're shivering in your thin shift. Your mother hands you a dress, a hand-me-down from your cousin's wedding, dyed a faded blue that's seen better days. It's the best your family can do, and you're grateful, but it itches against your skin, the wool heavy and stiff. You slip it on, trying not to snag the loose threads, and catch a glimpse of yourself in a polished copper plate your mother's propped up. You look fine, you suppose, but the girl staring back feels like a stranger. Joke number 1. If this dress is your globe, you're ready to glow right back to bed. The village expects you to look the part though, so you stand straighter. Even as your bare feet squelch in the mud, the air buzzes with activity now. You hear neighbors shouting, children running, and the distant lowing of cows being herded to pasture. Your mother's not done. She's weaving a crown of wildflowers into your hair, the stems prickling your scalp. It's tradition, she says, to ward off evil spirits, but you suspect it's just to distract from the dress's frayed hem. You're starting to feel like a prop in a play you didn't audition for. Your sister, lingering nearby, giggles and says you look like a saint from the church frescoes. You roll your eyes. Joke number 2. If saints had to wear this dress, they'd have rebelled sooner. But her laughter's a small comfort, a reminder of the life you're leaving behind. Your mother steps back, appraising you like a merchant sizing up a cart of turnips. She adjusts the flower crown, then hands you a pair of worn leather shoes, another dowry item your father grudgingly included. They're a bit tight, but you're not walking barefoot to the church. That's a bad omen, and you're already dodging enough of those. The village is waking up fully now, and you catch snippets of chatter through the screen. She's not bad looking, one man says, while a woman snips, hope she's tougher than she seems. You clench your fists, wishing you could disappear. This isn't just your wedding. It's the village's spectacle, and you're the main act as you step out from behind the screen. Your mother starts listing instructions. Keep your head down. During the ceremony, don't trip on the church steps. And for heaven's sake, don't talk back to the priest. You nod, half listening, your mind drifting to the groom. You still haven't seen him today, and the uncertainty gnaws at you. Will he be kind, drunk, indifferent? The preparations are supposed to make you feel ready, but they're just amplifying your dread. Joke number 3. Maybe if you scrub hard enough, you can wash away the whole wedding. For now, you follow your mother back to the cottage, the dress dragging in the dirt, as the villagers' eyes follow your every step. The church bells are ringing, and there's no turning back. You're trudging through the village, the itchy blue dress, remember that hand-me-down from your cousin, clinging to your legs as you follow your mother toward the open field where the wedding feast is already spiraling into chaos. The church bells from earlier are still echoing in your head, but now they're drowned out by the roar of laughter, shouting, and the off-key wail of a fiddle. Your flower crown's starting to wilt, one petal dangling over your eyebrow, and your too tight shoes pinch with every step. The bridal preparations left you feeling like a polished trinket, but now you're being tossed into the heart of the village's rowdiest event. This is the communal feast, and it's less a celebration and more a test of your endurance. In medieval Europe, wedding feasts were a big deal, especially for peasants, doubling as a community bonding ritual and a chance to eat something other than stale bread. By the 14th century, these feasts were often held outdoors, with everyone pitching in food or ale to keep costs down. Your family scraped together a spread of barley stew, roasted turnips, and a slightly tough pig your uncle swears was fresh. Yesterday, a quirky tidbit. Some villagers believed spilling ale during the feast brought good luck, so you're dodging sticky puddles as you weave through the crowd. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine superstition or just an excuse to get sloppily drunk, but the evidence around you leans toward the latter. You clutch a wooden cup of watered-down ale your mother thrust into your hands. The bitter taste doing little to calm your nerves. The field is a sea of faces, neighbors, cousins, strangers from the next village, all red-cheeked and loud. You spot your father arguing with the miller, probably still bickering over that dowry meadow. The groom's somewhere in this mess, but you haven't seen him yet, and you're not sure you want to. You're supposed to be the radiant bride, but you feel like a sheep herded toward a market stall. Joke number 1. If this is a feast, you'd hate to see their famine. A group of women, their aprons stained with grease, pull you toward a rickety table piled with food. They're cackling, offering you a hunk of bread and teasing about how you'll need strength for tonight. You blush, wishing the ground would swallow you whole. The village's obsession with your wedding night, those well-side whispers, is in full force, and their jokes are about as subtle as a cow in a chapel. You take a bite of the bread, dry and chewy, and try to smile. The air smells of smoke, sweat, and roasted meat, and the fiddle players now dueling with a drunken piper, the noise making your head throb. You find a moment to slip to the edge of the crowd, leaning against a gnarled oak tree. From here, you can see the whole scene. Children chasing a stray dog, men arm wrestling over a barrel, women gossiping in tight clusters. This feast isn't just about you. It's the village flexing its unity, showing off its ability to throw a party despite lean times. But it's also a reminder of how little privacy you have. You overhear a man bet a sack of oats that you'll do your duty tonight, and you grip your cup tighter, tempted to fling it at him. Joke number 2. Maybe you should have negotiated. A dowry clause for some actual peace and quiet. Your mother spots you and waves you back, her face a mix of pride and exasperation. She's in her element, bustling between tables, making sure the stew doesn't run out. You're expected to mingle, to play the blushing bride, but every step feels like wading through mud. You pass a group of young men, one of whom winks and says you're lucky to get the miller's boy. You force a smile, but inside you're screaming. The groom's still a mystery, and the feast's chaos isn't helping. You finally spot him across the field, surrounded by his brothers, laughing with a tankard in hand. He looks fine, you guess, but your heart doesn't leap, it sinks, as you're pulled back into the crowd. Someone shoves a slice of pork into your hands, and you eat it mechanically, the fat slick on your fingers. The feast is a blur of noise and faces, and you're counting the hours until you can escape. But escape to what? The church ceremonies next, and after that, the bedding ritual you've been dreading. Joke number 3. If the feast is this wild, the wedding night might just be a riot. For now, you let the crowd carry you, the ale loosening your nerves just enough to keep moving forward. You're stumbling away from the feast, your belly full of tough pork and sour ale, the villagers' raucous laughter still ringing in your ears. The field remembered that chaotic scene with the fiddler and spilled ale is behind you now, and you're being herded toward the church, your flower crown lopsided and your dress speckled with stew. The air's cooler as the sun dips, casting long shadows over the dirt path. Your mother's gripping your arm, steering you like a wayward goat, while your father trails behind, still grumbling about the miller's dowry demands. The wedding ceremony's about to start, and you're bracing for the priest's stern words, which everyone says will make your knees wobble. You're not sure if it's the ale or the dread, but your legs already feel unsteady. In medieval Europe, the church held iron control over marriage, especially by the 13th century, when it was declared a sacrament, binding you to your husband and God's rules for life. The priest's role wasn't just to bless the union, but to lecture you on its sacred duties, often with a tone that could curdle milk. You're expected to stand before the altar, head bowed, and promise obedience, chastity, and a lifetime of popping out airs. A quirky tidbit: some priests sprinkled holy water on the bride's head to cleanse her of sinful thoughts. Good luck with that, considering the village's bawdy feast jokes. Historians still argue whether these rituals were meant to sanctify or just intimidate. But as you approach the church's stone steps, intimidation's winning. The church looms ahead, its wooden door creaking as villagers pour in, their muddy boots scuffing the floor. You pause at the threshold, the air inside heavy with incense and damp stone. The priest, a gaunt man with a beard like a bramble patch, fixes you with a stare that says he's seen too many weddings go wrong. He's holding a worn prayer book, its pages curling, and you can already hear his voice, low and gravelly, droning. About sin, your mother nudges you forward, whispering to keep your eyes down. Joke number 1, if you look up, you might accidentally challenge God and the groom in one go. You shuffle to the altar, the crowd's murmurs buzzing like flies. The priest begins, his Latin words a blur, but you catch the gist. Marriage is your duty, a holy cage you're locking yourself into. He's not talking to you, really. He's addressing the groom who's standing a few feet away, smelling faintly of flour and ale. You steal a glance, his face is flushed, his tunic rumpled, but he's not running, so that's something. The priest's lecture shifts to warnings. No adultery, no defiance, and definitely no skipping church. You bite your lip to keep from smirking. Joke number 2. If skipping church was a sin, half the village would be doomed. But the weight of his words lands hard. This isn't just a ceremony, it's a contract you can't break. You're handed a ring, a simple iron band, cold against your finger. It's not a symbol of love, but of ownership, and the priest makes sure you know it. He's now preaching about Eve's fall, how women must submit to avoid her fate. You're tempted to roll your eyes, but the crowd's watching, and your mother's glare could pierce armor. The church's rules are clear. Your body, your labor, your future, they belong to your husband now. You think back to the feast, how the villagers' eyes followed you, and realize this ceremony's just another stage for their scrutiny. The priest's voice rises, and you flinch as he sprinkles that holy water cold, of course on your head. Ass. The ceremony drags on, your feet ache in those tight shoes, and the incense is making you dizzy. The groom mutters his vows, barely audible, and you echo yours, your voice a whisper. The priest's final warning is about the wedding night. It's your duty to fulfill the marriage debt, a phrase that makes your stomach lurch. Joke number 3. If this is a debt, you'd rather owe the miller a sack of grain. The crowd cheers as the priest declares you wed, but you feel more trapped than triumphant. You step outside, the evening air a relief, but the next ordeal's already looming, the bedding ceremony. For now, you cling to the ring on your finger, wondering what you've just promised. You're stepping out of the church, the priest's heavy words, remember that marriage debt warning, still ringing in your ears like a dear bell. The evening air is crisp, cutting through the fog of incense and sweat from the ceremony. But there's no time to catch your breath. The village crowd, half drunk from the feast, is surging around you, their cheers more rowdy than reverent. Your new husband, still a flower-dusted stranger, walks beside you, his shoulder brushing yours awkwardly. Your mother's fussing with your wilted flower crown, but her eyes are darting toward the path leading to the miller's house. That's where the bedding ceremony awaits, and the thought makes your skin prickle. You're not just a bride now. You're the main event in a ritual that's about to get far too personal. In medieval Europe, the bedding ceremony was a common tradition, especially among peasants, where the couple was escorted to the marriage bed by a gaggle of relatives and neighbors. By the 14th century, it was less about romance and more about proving the marriage was consummated to secure the alliance. Your dowries, meadow, and those chickens depend on it. A quirky tidbit: some villagers hung a sheet outside the next morning to show the bride's purity, a custom as invasive as it sounds. Historians still argue whether this was universal or varied by region, but right now, you're just praying. Your village skips the sheet part. The crowd's laughter tells you they're ready for a show. You're being steered down the path, the ground uneven under your pinching shoes. Torches flicker, casting jagged shadows, and the air smells of burning pitch and spilled ale. The groom's mother, a stout woman with a voice like a crow, is leading the charge, shouting for everyone to keep up. You catch her eyeing you, as if sizing up whether you're worth the barley her family demanded. Your own mother's whispering last-minute advice, something about lying still and praying, but it's drowned out by a group of men singing a bawdy song about a farmer and his plough. You blush, wishing you could bolt. Joke number 1. If this is a plough song, you're ready to plant yourself in a different village. The miller's house looms ahead, its thatched roof sagging like a tired brow. You've been here before, fetching flour, but now it feels like a foreign land. The crowd's pressing closer, their breath hot with ale and excitement. You glance at your husband, he's staring straight ahead, his jaw tight, and you wonder if he's as nervous as you are. Nobody's asked either of you what you want. This ceremony's for the village, not you. You think back to the priest's lecture about duty and try to steady your breathing. The bedding ritual's purpose is to ensure the marriage is complete, but it feels like a public trial, and you're the evidence. You step inside, the house dim and smoky, with a low ceiling that makes you duck. The marriage bed, really just a straw mattress on a creaky frame, sits in the corner, draped with a threadbare blanket. The crowd piles in, ignoring any pretense of personal space. Your sister's there, wide-eyed, probably thrilled to witness something she's too young to understand. The groom's brothers are cracking jokes, one of them waving a jug of ale like a trophy. You want to scream, but instead, you force a smile. Joke number 2. If smiling through this is a skill, you're ready for sainthood. The women start chanting something about fertility, and you grip the iron ring on your finger. Its weight, a small anchor. The bedding ceremony's rules are unspoken, but clear. You and the groom are expected to climb into bed while the crowd watches, prays or heckles, depending on their mood. You're not sure what's worse, their presence or the pressure to perform. Your mother-in-law shoves a cup of spiced wine into your hands, saying it'll help things along. You take a sip, the cloves bitter on your tongue, and try to ignore the man in the back shouting about getting to the good part. Joke number 3. If this is the good part, you'd rather skip to the epilogue. For now, you stand frozen, the bed looming like a stage, as the village waits for you to play your role in this medieval spectacle. You're standing in the miller's house, the smoky air pressing against you like a heavy cloak, and the bedding ceremony, remember that intrusive crowd from moments ago, is in full swing. The straw mattress in the corner, your soaked marriage bed, looks about as inviting as a pile of damp hay. Your husband's beside you, his breath sharp with ale, and the village mob is packed into the room, their torchlight flickering across the rough walls. Your flower crown's long gone, probably trampled at the feast, and your dress feels like a sack of regrets. You're clutching that spiced wine your mother-in-law gave you, its warmth doing little to thaw the chill in your bones. This is the bedchamber, and it's anything but romantic, more like a stage for the village's nosiest performance yet. In medieval Europe, the bedchamber, during a wedding, was less a private sanctuary and more a public checkpoint, especially for peasants, securing alliances like your dowries, meadow, and chickens. By the 14th century, the bedding ceremony often involved the couple being ushered to bed to prove the marriage's validity, with witnesses ensuring no funny business like an annulment could undo the deal. A quirky tidbit, some bedchambers were sprinkled with herbs like lavender to encourage the couple, though the stench of unwashed villagers probably overpowered any floral vibes. Historians still argue whether these herbs were for luck or just to mask the room's general funk. But you're too distracted to notice any scent beyond sweat and smoke. You take a shaky step toward the bed. The crowd's chatter swelling. Your mother-in-law's barking orders, telling everyone to make room, though nobody's listening. Your husband's brothers are still at it, one of them sloshing ale as he toasts to a fruitful night. You want a gag joke, number one. If this is fruitful, you'd rather plant turnips. Your mother's hovering near the door, her face a mix of worry and resignation, and you catch your sister's wide eyes, soaking up the chaos like it's a fair. The bed's frame creaks as someone, probably a drunk uncle, leans against it, and you're hyper-aware of every sound, every stare. Privacy's a myth here, and you're the proof. You glance at your husband, hoping for a hint of solidarity, but he's staring at the floor, his hands clenched. He's no more in control of this than you are, and that's oddly comforting. The priest's words from the church about duty and submission echo in your mind, but they feel distant, drowned out by the crowd's bawdy jokes. Someone shouts about warming the sheets, and you force a smile, though it feels like your face might crack. The bedchamber's supposed to be where the marriage becomes real, but it feels like a trial, with you and the groom as reluctant defendants. You think back to the feast, how the villagers' eyes never left you, and realize this is just the next act in their spectacle. Your mother-in-law grabs your arm, pulling you closer to the bed, and hands you a linen shift thinner, then your dress, meant for the night ahead. You clutch it, dreading the moment you'll have to change in front of this mob. The crowd's chanting now, a mix of prayers and lewd suggestions, and you're torn between laughing and screaming. Joke number two. If this is a prayer, God's probably covering his ears. The bed straw crunches as your husband sits, the mattress sagging under his weight, and the crowd cheers like he's slain a dragon. You're expected to follow, but your feet feel rooted to the floor, the spiced wine sloshing in your trembling hand. The room's getting warmer, the torches and bodies making it stifling. You catch a whiff of something herbal, maybe those lavender sprinkles, but it's faint, buried under the reek of ale and wool. Your mother-in-law's voice cuts through, urging you to get on with it, and you realize there's no escape. The bedchamber's not a haven. It's a checkpoint, and the village won't leave until they're satisfied. You think about the dowry, the church vows, all the steps that led here, and wonder if you'll ever feel like more than a pawn. Joke number three. If this is the honeymoon, you're ready for a very long nap. For now, you take a deep breath, step toward the bed, and brace for whatever comes next in this medieval circus. You're in the miller's cramped bedchamber, the straw mattress, remember that sagging, herb-sprinkled thing, creaking under your husband's weight as he sits, looking as uncomfortable as you feel. The crowd's packed in tighter than a sack of grain, their torchlight dancing on the walls, and the air's thick with ale fumes, sweat, and the faint whiff of lavender that's fighting a losing battle. You're still clutching the thin linen shift. Your mother-in-law thrust at you, your knuckles white round the spiced wine cup. The bedding ceremony's reached its peak, and you're the center of attention, with every villager from your giggling sister to the ale-soaked uncles watching like hawks. Your dress feels like a prison, and the idea of climbing into that bed with this mob staring makes your stomach lurch. In medieval Europe, the bedding ceremony was the villagers' way of ensuring the marriage was sealed, often with witnesses lingering to confirm the couple's duty was done. By the 14th century, this was less about romance and more about legal proof. Your dowry, that meadow, those chickens, all hinge on this moment. A quirky tidbit: some communities had a bedding song a rowdy chant to inspire the couple. And you're cringing as the crowd starts a slurred version about plowing fields and sowing seeds. Historians still argue whether these songs were meant to bless the union or just embarrass everyone involved. But you're betting on the latter as the lyrics get filthier. You force yourself to move, setting the wine cup on a wobbly stool and clutching the shift closer. Your mother-in-law's glaring, her arms crossed, as if your hesitation's a personal insult. The crowd's chanting grows louder, and you catch your husband's eye. He looks like he'd rather be anywhere else, which is oddly reassuring. You're both trapped in this farce, pawns in the villagers' game. You think back to the priest's stern lecture about the marriage debt, and wonder how anyone could feel anything but dread in this chaos. Joke number 1. If this is debt collection, you'd rather owe the miller a lifetime of flour, the women in the room your mother, the groom's aunts, a few nosy neighbors start fussing, urging you to change into the shift. You glance at the bed, its blanket frayed and lumpy, and realize there's no private corner to slip into. You're expected to strip here, with every eye on you. Your cheeks burn, and you mutter a silent prayer for a sudden thunderstorm to scatter the crowd. No such luck, the torches keep burning, and the song's hitting a particularly crude verse about ripe harvests. You fumble with the ties on your dress, your fingers clumsy, and manage a weak smile. Joke number 2. If this is a harvest, you're the turnip nobody wants. Your mother steps forward, shielding you slightly as you pull the dress over your head, the wool catching on your hair. The shift's cold against your skin, thin enough to make you feel exposed, and you cross your arms, wishing you could vanish. The crowd's cheers spike as you emerge, and you hear someone shout about a fine bride. You want to snap back, but instead you focus on the bed, where your husband's now lying, his boots still on, looking like a man awaiting a tooth pulling. The bedding ceremony's supposed to be a ritual, but it feels like a public shaming. With you and the groom as the reluctant stars, you take a step toward the bed, the floorboards creaking underfoot, and the crowd's noise swells again. Your sister's still there, perched on a barrel, her eyes huge. She's probably storing every detail to gossip about later. The men are slapping each other's backs, toasting with sloshing tankards, while the women start a new chant, something about babies and blessings. You climb onto the mattress, the straw crunching loudly, and slide under the blanket, your heart pounding. Your husband shifts, his elbow brushing yours, and you both freeze. The crowd's presence making every move feel like a performance. Joke number 3. If this is a performance, you're ready for the curtain to drop. The bedchamber's a furnace now, the heat from the torches and bodies overwhelming. You lie there, staring at the ceiling's blackened beams as the crowd's chants fade into a drunken hum. This is at the moment the villagers been waiting for, the proof their alliance is secure. You're not thinking about love or even duty. You're just trying to survive the scrutiny. The bedding ceremony's almost over, but the night's far from done, and you're already dreading what comes next. You're lying on the straw mattress, the coarse blanket scratching your skin through the thin shift. Remember that flimsy thing you changed into under the crowd's gaze. The bedchamber's still packed, though the bedding ceremony's rowdy. Chants are finally petering out. The torches cast a dim glow, and the air's thick with the stench of ale, sweat, and that faint lavender no one's buying as romantic. Your husband's beside you, his breath uneven, and you're both stiff as boards, hype-aware of the villagers, lingering like uninvited ghosts. The ploughing field song has mercifully stopped, but the crowd's not leaving their milling. About whispering, waiting for, what? You're craving solitude, a moment to breathe. But in this village, privacy's as rare as a warm bath in winter. In medieval Europe, privacy was a luxury, especially during weddings, where the community's stake in the marriage or dowry's meadow, those chickens meant, everyone felt entitled to stick around. By the 14th century, the bedding ceremony often stretched past the initial escort to the bed, with some villagers hanging about to ensure the couple didn't dodge their duty. A quirky tidbit: in some regions, newlyweds were given a bridle, ale to drink in bed, supposedly to ease nerves, but you're eyeing the empty wine cup on the stool and wishing for a refill. Historians still argue whether this ale was a kind gesture or just another way to keep the couple under scrutiny. But you're leaning toward the latter as a nosy ant peers over your blanket. You shift slightly, the straw crunching loudly, and your husband mutters something under his breath, maybe a curse, maybe a prayer. You're both trapped in this bed, the crowd's presence a weight heavier than the priest's vows. You think back to the church, that iron ring still cold on your finger, and wonder how you went from hauling well water to lying here. The village's entertainment. Your mother's near the door, shooing a few drunks who've started bickering over a lost bet, but she's not leaving either. You want to scream for everyone to get out, but that'd only fuel their gossip. Joke number 1. If privacy's a sin, this village is downright saintly. The bedchamber's walls feel like they're closing in, the blackened beams overhead seeming lower than before. You catch your sister's silhouette, she's still perched on that barrel, probably memorizing every awkward moment for later. The groom's mother is bustling about, pretending to tidy but really just hovering, her eyes flicking to the bed every few seconds. You're supposed to be sealing the marriage, but the idea of intimacy with this stranger under these stairs is laughable. You try to imagine a world where you could close a door, draw a curtain, anything, but this is medieval life, where your business is everyone's business. You pull the blanket higher, as if it could shield you from their expectations. A man? In the corner, some cousin of the groom's starts a new toast, sloshing ale and shouting about heirs for the mill. The crowd laughs, and you feel your face burn. Your husband shifts again, his elbow grazing yours, and you both flinch like you've touched a hot iron. You're not sure what's worse, the village's obsession with your fertility, or the fact that you're expected to make it happen with them watching. Joke number 2. If heirs are the goal, they might want to clear the room first. You think about the feast, how the villagers' eyes never left you, and realize this bedchamber's just another stage, with no curtain to drop. Your mother finally snaps at the crowd to give the couple space, but her tone's half-hearted, and only a few stumble out, their laughter echoing down the path. The room's still too full, the air too warm, and you're counting the moments until you can at least pretend to sleep. You glance at your husband, his face half hidden in the shadows, and wonder what he's thinking. Does he hate this as much? As you do, the priest's words about duty loom large, but so does your longing for a moment alone. Joke number 3. If solitude's a treasure, you're the poorest bride in the village. For now, you lie still, the straw poking through the mattress, and wait for the crowd to thin, knowing the night's real challenges are still ahead. You're still in the miller's bedchamber, the straw mattress, remember, that prickly, creaky thing, digging into your back through the thin shift. The crowd's finally thinning, thank heavens, with your mother-in-law's half-hearted shooing sending a few drunks stumbling out into the night. The torches are burning low, casting long shadows across the room. but the air is still heavy with ale fumes and the lingering stares of those who refuse to leave. Your husband's beside you, silent and stiff, his flour-dusted hands folded awkwardly on the blanket. The bedding ceremony's chaos is fading. But now you're face to face with him, your stranger groom, for the first time, without a mob chanting about plows or heirs. You're alone, sort of, and the sudden quiet makes your heart race faster than the crowd's bawdy songs did. In medieval Europe, marriages were often arranged, and meeting your spouse for the first time on the wedding day wasn't uncommon, especially for peasants like you tying together families over land and livestock. By the 14th century, the church required mutual consent for marriage, but consent was a loose term when your family's survival, like that dowry meadow, depended on the match. A quirky tidbit: some brides were given a groom's token, like a coin or a knife, as a symbol of the union, but you're still clutching that iron ring, and it's all you've got. Historians still argue whether these tokens were gestures of affection or just another contractual seal. But as you glance at your husband's blank face, affection feels like a distant dream. You shift slightly, the straw crunching, and steal a look at him. He's not bad looking, you suppose, broad shoulders, a jaw that's more stubborn than handsome, and eyes that won't meet yours. He's the miller's son, someone you've seen in passing, always dusted with flour like a ghost of the mill. But now, in this dim light, he's a mystery, and you're supposed to share a life with him. You think back to the feast, how you spotted him laughing with his brothers, and wonder if that easy smile will ever turn your way. Joke number 1. If he's this quiet now, you might be married to a sack of flour. The room's quieter, but your mother's still lingering by the door, pretending to fuss with a basket of bread. Your sister's gone, probably dragged off to bed, and the groom's mother is snoring in a corner, her supervision defeated by ale. You're not truly alone. Privacy's still a fantasy, but it's close enough to make you hyper-aware of every creak, every breath. You clear your throat, thinking maybe you should say something, but what? Nice wedding. Sorry about the bedding song. Your husband shifts, his elbow brushing yours again, and you both freeze, like two cats caught in a barn. The silence is louder than the crowd ever was. You try to piece together what you know about him. He's maybe 20, works the mill, drinks too much at Festival's Village. Gossip's been clear on that. But is he kind? Cruel? Does he even want you? Or is he just following his father's orders, like you're following yours? The priest's lecture about marriage debt floats back, and you push it away, not ready to think about that. You're still reeling from the Datha feast, the church, the bedchamber circus. Joke number 2. If marriage is a debt, you'd rather negotiate with a moneylender than this stranger. You glance at him again, hoping for a clue, but he's staring at the ceiling, his jaw tight. The bedchamber's cold now, the torch is nearly spent, and you pull the blanket higher. It's rough, we've no comfort. You're supposed to be starting a life together, but you feel like strangers shipwrecked on the same shore. You think about the dowry, the church, vows, all the steps that led here, and wonder if he feels as trapped as you do. A distant dog barks, and you flinch, the sound sharp in the quiet. Your husband finally speaks, his voice low. This is a lot. You nod, surprised by the honesty, and for the first time you feel a flicker of connection. Joke number 3. If a lot sums up marriage, you're off to a poetic start. For now, you lie there, the straw poking your back, waiting for the courage to face the night ahead. You're still lying on the straw mattress, the bedchamber's chill seeping through the thin blanket, Remember that rough, threadbare thing. As the last of the bedding ceremonies, stragglers finally shuffle out. Your husband's words, that quiet this is, a lot, hang in the air. A small bridge between you, though you're both still stiff as planks. The torches are down to stubs, casting a faint glow, and the room's quiet enough that you hear the distant hoot of an owl outside. Your mother's gone, the groom's mother's snoring has faded, and for the first time, it's just you and this flower-dusted stranger you're now bound to. But the weight of the Datha feast, the priest, the crowd's stares, has you questioning your role in this marriage. You're not just a bride, you're a cog in a machine, and you're wondering how much say you really have. In medieval Europe, consent in marriage was a murky concept. By the 13th century, the church insisted both parties agree to the union at the altar. But agreement often meant nodding under pressure from family, like your dowry's meadow and those chickens, tying you to the miller's son. Your choice was less about desire and more about survival, say. No, and you risk being a burden or worse, cast out. A quirky tidbit. Some brides tried to delay consummation by claiming illness, a loophole to buy time, though it rarely worked. Once the bedding ceremony rolled around, historians still argue whether these delays were acts of resistance or just desperate stalling. But as you lie here, you're wondering if you could have pushed back at all. You shift, the straw crunching, and glance at your husband. His face is half-shadowed, his eyes still fixed on the ceiling, but his earlier words give you a sliver of courage. You're supposed to be his wife, but what does that mean when you barely know him? You think back to the church, the priests, droning about submission, and feel a spark of defiance. Did you choose this, or was it chosen for you? Your family needed the alliance, the village needed the spectacle. But what about you? You clear your throat, testing the silence. Did you want this? You ask, your voice barely above a whisper. He tenses, and for a moment you regret speaking. Joke number 1. If silence is an answer. You're married to a monk. He turns his head slightly, his eyes meeting yours for the first time. Not like I had a say either, he mutters, his voice rough but not unkind. It's not a love sonnet, but it's honest, and it cracks the wall between you. You realize he's as much a pawn as you are, caught in the same web of family and village expectations. The bedchamber's cold, the air stale with smoke, but this small exchange feels like a lifeline. You think about the gossip at the well, how the village painted him as a drunk with a temper, and wonder how much is true. Maybe he's wondering the same about you after all. You're the girl who nearly tripped at the church steps. The iron ring on your finger feels heavier now, a reminder of the vows you mumbled under pressure. Consent might have been required, but it was more a formality than a choice. You think about your mother's frantic preparations, your father's dowry fights, and realize they weren't just arranging a wedding, they were arranging your life. You pull the blanket up, its weave scratching your chin, and try to imagine saying no at the altar. The village would have erupted, your family shamed, and you'd be the spinster hauling water forever. Joke number 2. If consent's a choice, you'd have chosen a nap instead. The mattress shifts as your husband rolls onto his side, facing away, and you're left staring at the blackened beams overhead. You're not sure what you expected, some grand rebellion. But the reality is you're here, married, with no way out. The church's rules, the village's eyes, your family's needs, they've all conspired to land you in this bed. You think about that illness loophole and smirk. Joke number 3. If you'd faked a cough. the crowd would have probably prayed over you instead of leaving. For now, you lie still, the owls hoot the only sound, and grapple with the truth. You're in this marriage, willing or not, and the night's only just begun. You're still on the straw mattress. The bedchamber's chill wrapping around you like a damp cloak. Despite the scratchy blanket, remember that frayed thing, pulled up to your chin. Your husband's turned away, his back a silent wall, after your whispered question about wanting this marriage and his blunt reply, "Not like I had a say either." The quiet between you is heavy, broken only by the faint crackle of a dying torch and that owl hooting outside. The bedding ceremony's crowd is gone, but its weight lingers, and now you're grappling with a new pressure: fertility, the village, the church, your family's there, all banking on you to produce heirs, and the thought makes your chest tighten. You're not just a wife, you're a vessel for the miller's lineage, and the expectation feels like a stone on your ribs. In medieval Europe, producing children was a marriage's core purpose, especially for peasants whose heirs meant labor, and legacy like securing that dowry meadow for another generation. By the 14th century, the church hammered this home, framing fertility as a sacred duty, with childlessness often blamed on the wife's sin or weakness. A quirky tidbit: some villagers believed tying a red ribbon around a bride's waist during the wedding boosted fertility, and you're pretty sure your mother slipped one under your dress, though it's doing nothing for your nerves. Historians still argue whether these rituals were heartfelt or just desperate grasps at control in a world where childbirth was a gamble. But lying here, you feel the pressure like a physical force. You shift, the straw poking your side, and stare at the ceiling's blackened beams. Your husband's breathing is steady, but you're wide awake, your mind racing. The priest's lecture about marriage debt wasn't just about intimacy, it was about babies, and lots of them. You've heard the village gossip. Women who don't conceive are whispered about, pitied, or worse, shunned. You think back to the feast, those women teasing about strength for tonight, and realize they weren't just joking, they were sizing up your womb. Joke number 1. If babies are the goal, you'd rather be tasked with herding the villagers' goats. You glance at your husband's back, his tunic still on, flour smudged on the shoulder. He's part of this too, but the burden feels lopsided. If you don't produce an heir, it's your failure, not his. You've seen it happen. A neighbor, barren after years, left to scrub floors while her husband took a mistress. The church might frown on that, but the village turns a blind eye if it means a son for the family. You pull the blanket tighter, its weave rough against your skin, and try to push away the image of yourself in her place. Your mother's voice echoes, her frantic advice about lying still now making grim sense. She wasn't preparing you for love. She was preparing you for survival. The bedchamber's dark now, the last torch barely aglow, and the silence amplifies your thoughts. You think about the risks childbirth, a killer in these times, with half the women you know losing sisters or cousins to it. You've helped your mother tend to a laboring neighbor, seen the blood and the screams, and the memory makes you shiver. Yet the village expects you to dive into that danger, and soon. Joke number 2. If fertility's a blessing, it comes with a curse nobody mentions. You wonder if your husband's thinking about this too, or if he's just relieved the crowd's gone. His silence feels like a shield, and you're not sure how to breach it. You roll onto your side, facing his back, and trace the iron ring on your finger. It's a symbol of the vows that bind you, but also of the heirs you're supposed to deliver. The red ribbon, the priest's prayers, the village's stares, they're all part of the same machine. grinding toward one goal. You think about your question earlier about consent, and realize this pressures another layer of choice you don't have. Joke number 3. If heirs are currency, you're the mint, and the village is cashing in. For now, you lie there, the straw mattress, a reminder of the hard life ahead, and try to quiet your mind as the night stretches on. You're still curled on the straw mattress, the bedchamber's darkness wrapping you tighter than the scratchy blanket. Remember that worn, prickly thing. Your husband's back is still turned, his steady breathing a quiet wall, and the owl outside has gone silent, leaving you with just the creak of the settling house. The weight of fertility expectations, those heirs the village is banking on, sits heavy. But now your mind's snagged on something else. The strange rituals and superstitions swirling around this wedding night. Your mother's red ribbon, tied secretly under your dress, was just the start. The village is steeped in odd charms and old wives' tales, all meant to ensure luck, love, or at least a baby by next harvest. You're lying there, half expecting some new quirk to pop up, like a toad under the pillow for good fortune in medieval Europe. Wedding nights were layered with superstitions, as communities clung to rituals to ward off bad luck or barrenness in a world where both felt like divine punishment. By the 14th century, these customs varied wildly, some tied to the church, others older than the stone cross in the village square. A quirky tidbit: in some regions, brides were given a fertility posy, a bundle of herbs like fennel or rue tucked into the bed to warm the womb. Your mother-in-law slipped one under the mattress earlier, and you're pretty sure it's why the straw smells faintly of licorice. Historians still argue whether these posies were symbolic or genuinely believed to work. But as you shift and catch a whiff, you're skeptical. You roll onto your back, the straw poking through the thin shift, and trace the iron ring on your finger. That ribbon, the posy, even the holy water the priest splashed on youth, they're all part of the village's obsession with controlling this night. You think back to the feast, how a neighbor tossed salt over her shoulder when you passed, muttering about warding off spirits. You'd laughed then, but now, in the dark, it feels less funny. What if the charms don't work? What if they do, and you're thrust into the dangers of childbirth? Joke number 1. If salt keeps spirits away, you'll need a barrel for this. Marriage. Your husband stirs, his shoulder twitching, and you freeze, hoping he's not awake. You're not ready for another awkward exchange, not when your head's tangled in these rituals. You remember your mother's whispered warning before the bedding ceremony: don't step on the bed's left side, or you'll curse the marriage. You'd scoffed, but you still climbed in on the right, just in case. The village believes in these things: crumbs of bread under the bed for prosperity, a sprig of rosemary for fidelity, and you're caught between rolling your eyes and fearing their power. The bedchamber's cold, the air stale with smoke, and you pull the blanket higher. Its weave rough against your cheek. You think about the women at the feast, their teasing laced with these superstitions. One pressed a dried apple into your hand, saying it'd ensure a sweet union. You ate it, mostly to shut her up, but now you wonder if every bite was a spell you didn't sign up for. The church frowns on some of these practices, calling them pagan, but the priest didn't bat an eye when your mother-in-law lit a candle to guide the angels. Joke number 2. If angels need candles, they must have terrible eyesight. You're not sure what's worse, the church's rules or the village's charms, both piling pressure on this already fraught night. The mattress shifts as your husband rolls onto his back, his arm brushing yours, and you hold your breath. He's asleep, thankfully, his snores soft but steady. You're alone with your thoughts again, and they're circling back to the posy under the bed. What if it's not just herbs? What if it's some old magic, tying you tighter to this life you didn't choose? You think about the dowry, the vows, the crowd stares, and now these rituals, all weaving a net around you. Joke number 3. If charms guaranteed luck, you'd trade them all for a night without expectations. For now, you lie still, the faint licorice scent lingering, and try to shake the feeling that the village's superstitions are watching you as closely as its people did. You're still on the straw mattress, the bedchamber's darkness thick around you. The scratchy blanket remember that coarse, patched thing, offering little warmth against the creeping chill. Your husband's soft snores fill the quiet, a steady rhythm that's oddly grounding after the whirlwind of superstitions swirling in your head. Those fertility posies and red ribbons still nagging at you. The faint licorice scent from the herbs under the bed lingers. But now your thoughts are shifting to the bigger force behind this marriage, the church. Its rules, stricter than any village charm, have shaped every step of this day. From the priest's lecture to the iron ring on your finger, you're lying there, staring at the unseen beams above, realizing this night isn't just about you, your husband, or even the village. It's about the church's iron grip on your soul and your vows. In medieval Europe, the Catholic Church had cemented marriage as a sacrament by the 13th century, making it a sacred, unbreakable bond under God's watchful eye. Your wedding wasn't just a deal between families, like that dowry meadow or those chickens. It was a contract with divine stakes, enforced by priests who saw themselves as gatekeepers of salvation. A quirky tidbit: some couples were required to hang a cross above the marriage bed to sanctify the act. And you're pretty sure your mother-in-law nailed one up somewhere in this room, though it's too dark to see. Historians still argue whether these symbols were for devotion or just the church's way of keeping tabs on your bedroom. But you feel their weight like an extra blanket. You shift, the straw crunching, and tug the blanket closer. It's rough with scraping your chin. The church's rules are why you're here, in this bed with a stranger you barely know. The priest's voice echoes in your mind, his warnings about marriage, debt, and producing heirs, all framed as your duty to God. You think back to the ceremony, how he sprinkled holy water on your head, his eyes boring into you like you might bolt. He wasn't wrong to suspect. You'd have run if the village wasn't watching. Joke number 1. If God's watching this marriage, he's probably as confused as you are. The bedchamber's cold, the last torch long extinguished, and you're left with the memory of the church's stone walls, its incense choking the air. The priest made it clear, your vows are eternal, and breaking them through adultery, defiance, or barrenness means risking your soul. You've heard stories of women excommunicated, cast out for failing to fulfill their role, their families shamed alongside them. The church's power feels like a shadow in this room, bigger than the village's gossip or your family's. Expectations? You wonder if your husband feels it too, or if he's just sleeping through the divine fine print. You roll onto your side, facing his shadowed form, his snores unbroken. The church doesn't just demand heirs, it demands obedience. From you especially. The priest's lecture about Eve's sin wasn't subtle. Women are the weaker vessel, meant to submit. You clench your fist, the iron ring digging into your skin, and feel a flicker of defiance. You didn't choose this, not really, but the church says it's your path to salvation. Joke number 2. If submission's holy, you'd rather be a sinner with a day off. You think about the fertility posy, the holy water, all the rituals blending church and village law, and wonder where God ends and superstition begins. The mattress shifts as your husband mumbles something in his sleep, his arm flopping across the blanket. You freeze, half expecting him to wake, but he doesn't. The quiet lets your thoughts wander back to the church's role in your life. Sunday masses, confessions, the priest's sermons that always seem to target women. This marriage is your new altar, and you're expected to kneel. You think about the dowry, the bedding ceremony, the village's stairs, all funneled through the church's lens of duty. Joke number 3. If marriage is a sacrament, it's the kind that comes with a lifetime of penance. For now, you lie. Still, the straw poking your back, and try to reconcile the church's demands with the uncertain night ahead. You're still lying on the straw mattress, the bedchamber's darkness thick and cold. The scratchy blanket, remember that rough, patched thing, barely keeping the chill at bay. Your husband's snores are softer now, his arms still sprawled across the blanket from his sleepy mumble, and the quiet lets the church's looming presence, those sacred vows and warnings of sin, sink deeper into your thoughts. But now, as the night drags on, you're facing a new reality. The role of a medieval wife, the priest's words, the villager's stares, even that fertility posy under the bed, they've all been steering you toward this moment, where you're no longer just a daughter, but a woman expected to run a household, obey a husband, and uphold a web of gender roles tighter than the iron ring on your finger. In medieval Europe, gender roles in marriage were rigid, especially for peasants like you, where a wife's duties were both practical and symbolic, propping up family and village stability, like that dowry meadow's future. By the 14th century, women were expected to manage the home, raise children, and support their husband's work, all while staying submissive under church and social law. A quirky tidbit: some wives wore a housewife's belt, a leather strap hung with keys and tools, as a badge of their domestic authority. Your mother's got one, and you're dreading the day you inherit her clinking arsenal. Historians still argue whether these belts symbolized power or just chained women to endless tasks. But as you lie here, you're betting on the chain. You shift, the straw crunching, and stare into the dark. The bedchamber's beams invisible above. The church's rules, Eve's sin, submission, airs have already set the stage. But the village's expectations are just as heavy. You're supposed to cook, clean, spin wool, and keep the fire going, all while ensuring your husband's fed and the mill's grain keeps flowing. You think back to the feast, those women's knowing glances, their jokes about strength for tonight. They weren't just talking about the wedding night. They were welcoming you to a lifetime of labor. Joke number 1. If a job you'd like to negotiate for some days off. Your husband's arm twitches, and you glance at his shadowed form. He's the head of this new household, or so the priest says, but you're the one who'll keep it running. You've seen your mother haggle with merchants, patch clothes, and chase chickens, all while your father drank at the alehouse. The village might call him the master, but she's the backbone, and now that's your role. You pull the blanket tighter, its weave scratching your neck, and wonder how you'll manage. You're barely 17, and the thought of spinning enough wool to clothe a family or worse, bartering with the miller's own father, makes your head spin faster than a spindle. The bedchamber's silence is broken by a distant creak, maybe the house settling, maybe a mouse. You think about the women in the village, their hands rough from work, their faces lined from worry. They're your future, and it's not exactly inspiring. The church says your place is to serve, but you've seen wives quietly steer there. Husbands, like your mother nudging your father to fix the roof. Maybe there's power in this role, hidden under the drudgery. Joke number 2. If submission means running everything, you're about to be the sneakiest queen in the village. You roll onto your side, the straw poking through the thin shift, and try to imagine your new life. The miller's house will be your domain, its smoky hearth, its drafty corners, its endless chores. You'll be judged by how well you keep it, how quickly you produce heirs, how smoothly you fit into the village's rhythm. The dowry, the bedding ceremony, the church's vows, they've all funneled you here, to a role that feels like a costume you're not ready to wear. Your husband's snores falter, then resume, and you wonder if he's ready for his part either. Joke number 3. If marriage is a dance, you're both tripping over the steps. For now, you lie still, the weight of wifehood settling over you, and brace for the morning when this role becomes real. You're still on the straw mattress, the bedchamber's cold seeping through the thin shift. The scratchy blanket, remember that patched, coarse thing, doing little to warm you. Your husband's snores are steady now, a faint rumble that blends with the creak of the miller's house settling in the dark. The weight of your new role as a wife, those endless chores and village expectations, sits heavy. But now you're facing the night's core challenge, the awkward dance of intimacy. The church's rules, the fertility posy under the bed, the crowds, bawdy chants, they've all led to this moment, where you're supposed to seal the marriage with a stranger you barely know. Your heart's pounding, and the silence feels like a held breath, waiting for something to happen. In medieval Europe, consummation was the linchpin of a marriage's validity, especially for peasants like you, whose unions, like that dowry meadow, were about securing alliances and heirs. By the 14th century, the church viewed the marriage debt as a mutual obligation, but the pressure fell harder on women, whose worth was tied to fertility. A quirky tidbit: some couples were fed spiced possets, warm drinks laced with herbs, to stir the blood before the act. Your mother-in-law's spiced wine was probably meant for this, though it's left you more queasy than amorous. Historians still argue whether these drinks were aphrodisiacs or just placebo courage. But as you lie here, you're wishing for anything to ease the tension. You shift, the straw crunching loudly, and glance at your husband's shadowed form. He's still asleep, his arm flung across the blanket, oblivious to the storm in your head. You're supposed to, what? Wake him. Wait. The priest's lecture about duty looms, but the reality feels like a chasm. You've heard whispers from older women, vague hints about lying still or enduring, but nobody's told you how to navigate this with a man you've barely spoken to. You think back to the bedding ceremony, those crude songs about plowing fields, and feel your face heat. Joke number 1. If this is a field, you're not ready to be plowed. The bedchamber's dark, the last torch long gone, and the faint licorice scent from the posy under the bed is all that's left of the village's rituals. You pull the blanket higher, its weave rough against your skin, and try to steady your breathing. Your husband stirs, his snores faltering, and you freeze, half hoping he stays asleep. Intimacy's supposed to bind you, but it feels like a test you haven't studied for. You remember your mother's red ribbon, the church's cross overhead, and wonder if they're meant to guide you or just remind you of the stakes. The village expects heirs, the church expects duty, and you're caught in the middle, with no script to follow. Your husband rolls onto his back, his eyes half open now, glinting in the faint moonlight seeping through a crack in the shutters. He mutters something, maybe your name, maybe a curse, and you tense, your heart racing. "You awake?" he asks, his voice thick with sleep. You nod, then realize he can't see, and whisper, "Yeah." The silence stretches, awkward as a misstep in a dance. You're both supposed to know what comes next, but neither of you moves. Joke number 2. If this is a dance, you're both waiting for the music to start. You think about the spiced wine, the posy, all the props meant to make this easier, and wonder why they feel so useless. He shifts closer, his arm brushing yours, and you flinch, not out of fear but sheer uncertainty. He pauses, sensing it, and for a moment you're grateful he's not pushing. The church says this is your duty, but it's hard to feel anything but exposed, lying here in this cold, creaky bed. You think about the village's stairs, the dowries, wait, and realize this moment's just another step in their plan. You're not ready, and maybe he isn't either. He clears his throat, then says, "We don't have to, not tonight." It's a small mercy, and you exhale, the tension easing slightly. Joke number 3. If duty's a debt, you're both filing for bankruptcy. For now, you lie still, the straw poking your back, and let the night's awkwardness settle into something almost bearable. You're still on the straw mattress, the bedchamber's chill biting through the thin shift. The scratchy blanket, remember, that rough, frayed thing, offering little comfort. Your husband's words, that quiet "we don't have to, not tonight," linger like a rare kindness, easing the tension of the awkward intimacy you'd been dreading. His snores have resumed, soft and steady, and the faint moonlight through the shutters casts a pale glow across his flower-dusted shoulder. The night's grown quieter, but you're wide awake, your mind shifting from the bedchamber's pressures to the village outside. Even now, with the bedding ceremony over, you feel their eyes, those same gossips from the feast. The church, the well tracking your every move. You're not just a wife, you're their story, and they're waiting to see how it unfolds. In medieval Europe, villages were tight-knit, and a new bride's life was public property, especially when her marriage, like your dowries, meddled families and land together. By the 14th century, the community's scrutiny didn't end at the wedding. Neighbors watched for signs of success, heirs, harmony or failure, barrenness, discord, ready to weave it into their chatter. A quirky tidbit: some villagers appointed a bed monitor, an older woman who'd check on newlyweds the next morning to report on the marriage's progress. You're praying your mother-in-law isn't that dedicated, but her hovering during the bedding ceremony doesn't bode well. Historians still argue whether these monitors were official roles or just nosy volunteers, but you feel their shadow as you lie here. You shift, the straw crunching, and pull the blanket tighter, its weave scraping your chin. The village's obsession. With your wedding night, those bawdy songs, the fertility posy extends beyond this room. You imagine them now, huddled in the alehouse or their own smoky cottages, betting on whether you'll do your duty or crumble under the pressure. You think back to the well, those women whispering about the miller's son's temper, and wonder what they're saying about you. Are you the lucky girl or the one who'll falter? Joke number 1. If gossip's currency, the village is richer than a king. The bedchamber's dark, the licorice scent from the posy under the bed fading, but you can almost hear the village's hum beyond the walls, dogs barking, a late-night cart creaking, the low murmur of neighbors who never sleep. You're no stranger to their scrutiny. You've lived under it your whole life, from the time you spilled ale at a harvest festival to the day you mended your shift in public. But now, as a wife, the stakes are higher. They're watching for a swollen belly, a happy hearth, or any crack in your marriage they can pick apart. You think about your mother, how she navigates their stairs with a sharp tongue, and wonder if you'll ever have her armor. Your husband shifts, his arm brushing yours, and you flinch, though he's still asleep. His small mercy, earlier not pushing for intimacy, makes you wonder if he feels the villager's eyes too. He's the miller's son, after all, expected to uphold his family's name while you uphold the home. You imagine the men at the feast, slapping his back, their toasts about heirs for the mill. He's as much their puppet as you are. Joke number 2. If the village is a stage, you're both playing parts with no rehearsal. You think about the church's vows, the dowry's weight, and realize the community's scrutiny is the thread. Tying it all together, the mattress creaks as you roll onto your side, facing the wall's rough planks. You're already dreading tomorrow, when you'll step out of this house and face the village's questions, subtle or not, about how the night went. Will they check the sheets, like in those awful stories? Will your mother-in-law smirk or scowl? The thought makes you want to stay in this bed forever, uncomfortable as it is. Joke number 3. If scrutiny's a sport, the village deserves a crown for nosiness. For now, you lie still, the straw poking your back, and try to brace for the morning when the community's watchful eyes will sharpen, ready to judge your first steps as a wife. You're still on the straw mattress, the bedchamber's cold seeping into your bones. The scratchy blanket, remember that threadbare prickly thing, barely a shield against the chill. Your husband's snores are faint now, his arms still sprawled across the blanket, and the quiet of the night feels like a fragile truce. The village's watchful eyes, those gossips from the feast, the well, the bedding ceremony loom in your mind. Their scrutiny a constant hum you can't escape. But now, as dawn creeps closer, you're waking to a new reality, the morning after. You haven't slept, your eyes gritty, and you're already dreading the moment you'll step outside this room and face the village's questions, smirks, and not so subtle prods about what happened or didn't in this bed in medieval Europe. The morning after a wedding was a public affair, especially for peasants like you, whose marriage sealed alliances like that dowry meadow. By the 14th century, villagers often gathered to inspect the couple, sometimes even the bedsheets, to confirm the marriage was complete and the bride pure. A quirky tidbit in some communities. A bride was expected to serve breakfast to her in-laws as her first wifely act, a test of her domestic skills under their hawk-like gaze. You're hoping your mother-in-law's too hungover to demand pancakes, but her hovering last night suggests otherwise. Historians still argue whether these breakfasts were a ritual of welcome or just another way to judge the bride. But you're bracing for the worst. You shift, the straw crunching, and stare at the ceiling's unseen beams. The bedchambers, dark, but a faint grey light seeps through the shutters, signaling morning's approach. You think back to the bedding ceremony, those bawdy chants about heirs, and realize the villagers not done with you. They'll be waiting outside the miller's house, at the well, in the market for any sign of success or scandal. Did you do your duty? Is the miller's son pleased? You can already hear the whispers. She looked pale, or no. Smile, poor thing. Joke number 1. If gossip's a harvest, the village is reaping a bumper crop today. Your husband stirs, his snores faltering, and you glance at his shadowed form. His mercy last night not pushing for intimacy was a relief, but it's also a secret you're both carrying. If the village suspects you didn't consummate the marriage, the rumors will be merciless. You've heard of brides shamed for less, their families dragged into the mud, The church's rules, the fertility posy, the dowries wait there, all tied to this moment, and the morning's your first test as a wife. You pull the blanket tighter, its weave rough against your skin, and try to imagine facing the crowd. Your mother's probably already up, ready to fend off questions, but you'll have to face them to dot the bedchambers. Silence is broken by a rooster's crow outside, sharp and unwelcome. You think about your mother-in-law, her eagle eyes during the bedding ceremony, and wonder if she'll be at the door soon, demanding proof of something. You've heard horror stories sheets paraded through the village. Cheers for bloodstains and pray your village isn't that barbaric. But even without sheets, the women will watch your face, your walk, for clues. You think about the feast, those women's teasing about strength, and realize they're your judges now, ready to dissect your every move. Joke number 2. If scrutiny's a game, you're the village's favorite pawn. Your husband rolls onto his side, his eyes half open, and mutters, "Morning already." You nod, your throat tight, and he rubs his face, flour still smudged on his jaw. He doesn't say more, but his silence feels less hostile now, like you're both bracing for the same storm. You're supposed to step out as a united couple, but you feel like strangers thrown into a play with no lines. The church says you're one flesh now, but the village wants proof, and you're not sure how to fake it. Joke number 3. If marriage is a performance, you're both forgetting your cues. For now, you lie still, the straw poking your back, and steel yourself for the morning's scrutiny, knowing the village's eyes are already sharpening. You're still on the straw mattress, the bedchambers chill, clinging to you, despite the scratchy blanket. Remember that worn, coarse thing. Pulled tight, the faint grey light seeping through the shutters has grown brighter, and the rooster's crow from earlier is now joined by the village stirring outside, cartwheels creaking, a dog barking. Your husband's awake, rubbing his face, his flour-smudged jaw catching the dim light after muttering about the morning. The morning after scrutiny you've been dreading, those village eyes, waiting to judge your every move, looms closer. But now you're facing a new reality. Household duties. You're not just a bride anymore. You're the mistress of this miller's house. And the endless tasks of a medieval wife are about to crash over you like a bucket of cold, well-watered dot in medieval Europe. A wife's role was the backbone of the household, especially for peasants like you, where managing the home cooking, cleaning, spinning wool was as crucial as the miller's grain for survival. By the 14th century, a new bride was expected to dive into these duties immediately, proving her worth to her husband's family and the village, all while tied to alliances like your dowry's meadow. A quirky tidbit: some brides were gifted a household charm, like a carved wooden spoon, to bring luck to their chores. Your mother-in-law left one on the hearth, and you're already dreading its symbolic weight. Historians still argue whether these charms were tokens of support or just reminders of your new burdens. But you're leaning toward burdens as you eye the smoky hearth across the room. You shift the straw crunching and sit up, the blanket slipping to your waist. The bedchamber's cold, the air stale with last night's torch smoke, and you can hear your mother-in-law's footsteps already clumping outside the door. She's probably expecting you to stoke the fire, knead dough, or at least look like you know what you're doing. You think back to your mother's frantic preparations, her fussing over your dress, her whispered advice, and realize she was training you for this moment, not the wedding night. You're supposed to take charge of this house, its drafty corners and meager stores, while the village watches for any fumble. Joke number 1. If running a household is an art, You're still sketching stick figures. Your husband swings his legs off the bed, the frame creaking, and pulls on his boots, still silent but less tense than last night. You wonder if he expects you to leap up and start boiling porridge, like the perfect wife the priest described. You've helped your mother with chores your whole life, milking cows, patching clothes, but this is different. This is your hearth now, your responsibility, and the miller's family will judge you by how well you keep it burning. You glance at the wooden spoon on the hearth, its carved handle glinting in the dawn light, and feel a pang of dread. You're not ready to be your mother, not yet, but the village doesn't care. You stand, the floorboards icy under your bare feet, and pull the thin shift closer, wishing for your old dress, itchy as it was. The bedchambers are mess ale cups from the bedding ceremony, a wilted flower from your crowning. You're already itching to tidy it, if only to delay facing the world outside. You think about the morning after gossip, the women at the well who will dissect your every move, and realize your household duties are your first public test. If the fire goes out, if the bread's too tough, the village will know by noon. Joke. Number 2. If chores are a stage, you're performing for the nosiest audience in Christendom. Your husband clears his throat, glancing at you as he ties his belt. You need help with the fire, he asks, his voice gruff but not unkind. It's a small gesture, and you're surprised, given the church's talk of his authority. You shake your head, muttering you'll manage, though you're not sure you will. The dowry, the vows, the bedding ceremony, they've all led to this, where your worth as a wife hinges on a well-swept floor and a warm hearth. Joke number 3. If a clean house is salvation, you're praying for a miracle. For now, you step toward the hearth, the wooden spoon looming like a scepter, and brace for the day's work, knowing the villagers' eyes are already waiting. You're standing by the hearth in the miller's bedchamber, the cold floorboards biting your bare feet, the thin shift, remember that flimsy thing, no match for the morning chill. The straw mattress behind you, still rumpled from the night, feels like a distant memory as you face the smoky hearth and that carved wooden spoon, your household charm. Your husband's lacing his boots, his offer to help with the fire lingering. But you're already kneeling, fumbling with flint and kindling, determined to prove you can handle this. The villagers' scrutiny, those gossips waiting to judge. Your first day as a wife looms, but now a darker fear creeps in. Pregnancy, the church's push for heirs, the fertility posy, the bedding ceremony's chants, they've all pointed to this. And the thought of childbirth's deadly risks makes your hands tremble as you strike the flint dot in medieval Europe. Pregnancy was both a blessing and a peril, especially for peasant women like you, whose value was tied to producing heirs to work land like that dowry meadow. By the 14th century, childbirth was a leading cause of death, with estimates suggesting up to 1 in 5 women didn't survive it, often due to infection or hemorrhage. A quirky tidbit, some midwives used birthing charms, like tying a saint's relic to the mother's thigh to ease labor. Though you're skeptical anything could ease that pain after seeing your neighbor's ordeal. Historians still argue whether these charms offered comfort or just false hope. But as you coax a spark into the kindling, you're praying for anything to keep that fate at bay. The fire catches, a weak flame licking the twigs, and you sit back. On your heels, the smoky warmth, a small victory. You think back to the bedding ceremony, those women's jokes about fruitful nights, and realize they weren't just teasing, they were warning you. Pregnancy isn't just expected, it's demanded by the church, the village, even your new in-laws. You've seen the aftermath: your cousin, pale and shaking after a stillbirth, or the neighbor who never woke up. The fear's like a knot in your gut, tighter than the iron ring on your finger. Joke number 1. If heirs are a gift, you'd rather get a basket of apples. Your husband stands, stretching, and glances at you by the hearth. Fire's going, he says, almost a compliment, and you nod, too preoccupied to reply. He's part of this tooth of pressure to produce a son for the mill, but the danger's yours alone. You think about last night, his mercy in not pushing for intimacy, and wonder if he knows the risks you'll face. The church calls childbirth your duty, but it feels like a gamble with your life. You add a log to the fire, the smoke stinging your eyes, and try to push away the image of blood-soaked straw. A scene you've witnessed too often in this village. The bedchamber's brighter now, dawn's light spilling through the shutters, and you hear your mother-in-law's voice outside, calling for someone to fetch water. She'll be in soon, expecting you to start the day's chores: bread, laundry, maybe even that breakfast ritual to prove your worth. But pregnancy's shadow hangs heavier than any chore. You think about the fertility posy, the red ribbon, all the village's charms, and wonder if they're meant to protect you or just ensure you deliver. Joke number 2. If charms prevent danger, you'll need a sackful for what's coming. You stand, brushing ash from your hands, and feel the weight of the future: a child, a family, a life you're not sure you'll survive. Your husband steps toward the door, muttering about checking the mill, and you're left alone with the crackling fire. The village outside is waking children shouting, a cart rumbling, and you know they're already whispering about you, the new bride, wondering if you're with child yet. The church's vows, the dowry stakes, the village's eyes there, all pushing you toward motherhood, but the fear of what it costs is yours alone. Joke number 3. If pregnancy's a race, you're not sure you want to run. For now, you turn back to the hearth, the wooden spoon gleaming like a silent judge, and brace for the day, knowing the spectre of childbirth will follow you out the door. You're standing by the hearth, the weak fire you coaxed to life. Remember that smoky victory, casting a faint warmth across the bedchamber's cold floorboards. The straw mattress behind you is a tangled mess, the scratchy blanket still crumpled from your sleepless night. The thin shift clings to your skin, no defense against the morning chill, and the carved wooden spoon on the hearth looms like a silent reminder of your new duties. Your husband's gone, muttering about the mill, leaving you alone with the crackle of the fire and the weight of pregnancy fears, those childbirth risks still knotting your stomach. But now, as you hear your mother-in-law's footsteps clomping closer, you're facing another reality: your husband's authority. The church says he's the head of this house, and you're supposed to bend to his will, whether he's kind or cruel. In medieval Europe, a husband's authority was absolute, especially in peasant households like this one, where the man's word, backed by church and custom, governed everything from land to labor, including that dowry meadow. By the 14th century, the church's teachings on marriage placed men as the head and women as the heart, a poetic way of saying you're expected to obey without question. A quirky tidbit: some husbands gave their wives a rule, token like a small staff, to symbolize their shared governance. Though it was mostly a polite fiction, your mother-in-law's glare suggests no such tokens coming your way. Historians still argue whether these tokens hinted at partnership or just dressed up male dominance. But as you poke the fire, you're bracing for the latter. The door creaks open, and your mother-in-law stomps in, her apron already dusted with flour. Fire's weak, she snaps, eyeing your handiwork, and you bite back a retort, knowing she's testing you. You think back to the bedding ceremony, her hawk-like stare, and realize she's not just judging your chores, she's judging how well you'll submit to her son. Your husband's authority isn't just his, it's hers, too, until you prove yourself. You add a log to the fire, the sparks flaring, and feel the weight of his role settle over you. He's the miller's son, the man who'll decide when you eat, sleep, or speak, and you barely know him. Joke number 1. If he's the head, you're hoping for a very quiet reign. You glance at the bedchamber's dim corners, the ale cups from last night still scattered, and wonder what kind of husband he'll be. The village gossip, those whispers about his temper nags at you, but his mercy last night, not pushing for intimacy, gives you a flicker of hope. Still, the church's rules are clear. He's your lord now, and defiance could mean a beating, or worse, shame that'd ripple to your family. You've seen wives with bruised arms, their eyes downcast, and the thought makes your hands tremble as you sweep ash from the hearth. You think about your mother, how she nudges your father's decisions with a sharp word, and wonder if you'll ever have that knack. Your mother-in-law's still hovering, muttering about the bread you should have started. You nod, grabbing a sack of coarse flour, probably from your husband's mill, and start measuring it, your fingers clumsy. His authority extends here, too. If the bread's bad, it's your fault, but he'll get the blame for a poorly run house. You think about the dowry, the church vows, the villagers' eyes, all propping up his power over you. Yet he seemed as trapped as you last night, a pawn in the same game. Joke number 2. If he's the king, you're both stuck in the same checkmate. The fire's stronger now, its heat warming your face. But the bedchamber feels smaller, the walls closing in with the weight of his role. You hear a shout outside, maybe your husband, maybe a neighbor, and flinch, half expecting him to barge in with orders. The church says you're one flesh, but he's the one with the voice. You knead the dough, your hands sinking into its stickiness, and try to imagine a life where his authority doesn't feel like a yoke. Joke number 3. If obedience is a virtue, you're about to be the least virtuous wife in the village. For now, you focus on the bread, the wooden spoon, your only ally, and brace for the moment he returns, knowing his word will shape the day ahead. You're kneading dough by the hearth, the bedchamber's smoky warmth a faint shield against the morning chill. The thin shift, remember, that flimsy thing, sticking to your skin as you work. The straw mattress in the corner is a distant memory, its scratchy blanket left in a heap, while the carved wooden spoon on the hearth watches like a stern overseer. Your mother-in-law's gone, her parting jab about the bread still stinging, and the weight of your husband's authority, his church-backed rule over this house looms as you shape the dough. But now, as the village hums outside, you're thinking about the women who've been through this before, their advice a lifeline you're desperate to grasp. Their voices, from the feasts teasing to your mother's whispers, echo in your mind, offering tips on surviving this new life as a wife in medieval Europe. Experienced wives were a bride's best resource, passing down practical and emotional wisdom in a world where marriage, like your dowry's meadow, was a high-stakes contract. By the 14th century, women shared knowledge through informal networks, from well-side chats to market stalls, teaching new brides how to manage chores, husbands, and village gossip. A quirky tidbit: some women gave brides bundles, small pouches of herbs or thread, as tokens of sisterhood to help with household tasks. Your mother slipped one into your hand yesterday, and it's tucked in your shift now, smelling faintly of time. Historians still argue whether these bundles were practical gifts or symbolic support. But as you need, you're clinging to their promise of guidance. The dough's sticky, clinging to your fingers, and you pause to scrape it off. The fire's heat making your face flush. You think back to the feast. Those women's knowing looks as they pressed bread or apples into your hands. Their words layered with advice. Keep the hearth hot, but don't burn the stew. Or smile at him, even when he's wrong. Your mother's voice was the loudest, her warning to bend like a reed in the face of your husband's authority. She's navigated your father's moods for years, and you're starting to see her strength in a new light. Joke number 1. If bending's a skill, your mother's the village champion. You glance at the bedchamber's door, half expecting your mother-in-law to barge back in. But it's quiet, save for the village's morning bustle, children shouting, a cow lowing. You think about your neighbor, Agnes, a wiry woman with a laugh like a crow, who cornered you at the well last week. Don't argue in public, she'd said, but whisper your way in private. Her husband's a drunk, yet she keeps their cottage spotless, her children fed. Her advice feels like a map, but you're not sure you can follow it. You add flour to the dough, your hands steadier now, and wonder how many brides before you leaned on these women's words to survive. The fire crackles, spitting a spark onto the floor, and you stamp it out, your bare feet cold against the boards. You think about the bride's bundle in your shift. It's time a reminder of the women rooting for you, even if their advice comes with a side of scrutiny. Agnes also warned about the villagers' gossip, those eyes waiting to judge your bread, your belly, your marriage. You're starting to see the balance. Take their wisdom, but guard your heart. Joke number 2. If advice is a stew, you're drowning in everyone's secret ingredients. You shape the dough into a loaf, your hands finding a rhythm, and feel a flicker of confidence fueled by their words. Your husband's still at the mill, his authority a shadow you'll face soon enough. But the women's advice, your mother's, Agnes's, even the feast's, teasing gives you a spark of agency. You think about the dowry, the church vows, the bedding ceremony, all pushing you into this role, but these women are showing you how to carve out space within it. You set the loaf by the fire to rise, the wooden spoon glinting like a nod of approval. Joke number 3. If surviving marriage is a craft, you're apprenticing with the best. For now, you wipe your hands on your shift, the time's scent, lingering, and brace for the day, knowing the village women's wisdom is your quiet armor against what's to come. You're still by the hearth, the bedchamber's smoky warmth mixing with the scent of rising dough. Remember that loaf you shaped, guided by the village women's advice. The straw mattress in the corner is a fading memory, its scratchy blanket abandoned, and the thin shift clings to your skin as you wipe flour from your hands. The carved wooden spoon on the hearth gleams, a quiet ally, while the bride's bundle of time in your shift offers a faint, grounding whiff. The women's words, your mother's, Agnes's, have given you a spark of strength. But now, as the village's morning bustle grows louder outside, you're wondering about something softer, love. The church, the dowry, the bedding ceremony, they've all been about duty. But could affection, maybe even a slow spark, grow with this flower-dusted stranger you call husband? In medieval Europe, love in marriage was often an afterthought, especially for peasants like you, whose unions like that dowry meadow were forged for survival, not sentiment. By the 14th century, the church framed marriage as a sacred duty, with love a bonus, not a requirement, though troubadour tales of courtly romance trickled into village gossip, planting dreams of something more. A quirky tidbit: some couples exchanged love tokens, like a braided cord or a polished stone, as private gestures of hope. Your mother mentioned your father gave her one, though you've seen no sign of it in their bickering. Historians still argue whether these tokens were common among peasants or just noble fantasies. But as you poke the fire, you're wondering if love could bloom in this miller's house. The fire crackles, its heat warming your face, and you glance at the bedchamber's door, half expecting your husband to return. You think back to last night, his quiet mercy note pushing for intimacy, his muttered, "This is a lot," and feel a flicker of possibility. He's not the knight of a minstrel song, but there's a gruff honesty in him that's not terrible. You've seen couples in the village, like Agnes and her drunk husband, who seem to share a weary fondness, carved out over years of shared hardship. Could that be you, someday? Joke number 1. If love's a crop you're planting in rocky soil, you turn back to the dough, checking its rise, the yeasty smell grounding you. The church says love is obedience, but your mother's advice, bend like a reed, hinted at something else, a slow dance of Gavant. You think about your husband's offer to help with the fire, a small crack in his church-given authority, and wonder if it's a sign. Love, if it comes, won't be a lightning bolt. It'll be a gradual thaw, like snow melting under a week. Spring sun. You think about the bedding ceremonies, chaos, the village's stairs, and realize those pressures might bind you closer, if only through shared survival. You smile, imagining a day when you might laugh together over the memory of that awful ploughing song. The bedchamber's brighter now, morning light spilling through the shutters, and you hear your mother-in-law's voice outside, haggling with a neighbor. You're still nervous about her judgment, your bread, your chores, but the thought of love, however distant, softens the edge. You think about the bride's bundle, its time a gift from women who've walked this path, and wonder if they found love too. Maybe your mother did, in her own way, despite your father's grumbling. Joke number 2. If love's a recipe, you're missing half the ingredients, but you'll stir anyway. Your husband's boots thud outside, and you pause, your heart skipping. He steps in, flour smudged on his cheek, and nods at the dough. "Smells good," he says, his voice low but not unkind. It's not a sonnet, but it's something, and you nod back, a tiny spark flickering. The church, the village, the dowry, they've built this marriage, but love, if it grows, will be yours to nurture. Joke number 3. If affection's a seed. You're both terrible gardeners, but you might try. For now, you turn back to the hearth, the loaf rising steadily, and let the possibility of a slow spark settle in your chest as the day's work pulls you forward. You're still by the hearth, the bedchamber's smoky warmth mingling with the yeasty scent of the rising loaf. Remember that dough you shaped, fueled by the village women's advice. The straw mattress in the corner is a faint echo, it's scratchy, blanket forgotten, and the thin shift clings to your skin as you brush flour from your hands. The carved wooden spoon on the hearth stands sentinel, while the bride's bundle of time in your shift offers a faint, steadying whiff. Your husband's brief visit, his gruff smells good about the bread, left a spark of hope for love's slow growth. But now, as the morning light floods the shutters, you're grappling with a grim truth. Annulment, escaping this marriage, with its dowry, meadow, and church vows, is a near impossible dream, and the thought tightens your chest like a too-tight corset in medieval Europe. Annulment was a rare and thorny path, especially for peasants like you, whose marriages were cemented. by practical needs and sacred oaths. By the 14th century, the Church allowed annulments only for specific reasons: non-consummation, fraud, or pre-existing vows. But the process was costly, complex, and heavily scrutinized, often leaving women trapped. A quirky tidbit: some desperate brides claimed bewitchment to void their marriage, blaming spells for their husband's failure in bed, though priests rarely bought it. Historians still argue whether these claims were genuine beliefs or cunning ploys. But as you poke the fire, you're wondering if any escape, magical or not, could free you from this miller's house. The fire crackles, its heat stinging your knuckles, and you glance at the bedchamber's door, where your husband's boots last thudded. His mercy last night, not pushing for intimacy, saved you from the marriage debt. But it also means the marriage isn't fully sealed, a technicality that could, in theory, open the annulment door. You think back to the bedding ceremony, the village's chants for heirs, and realize non-consummation would be a scandal, shaming your family and his. You'd be the girl who failed, cast back to your parents' cottage, a burden forever. Joke number 1. If annulment's a key, it's locked in a chest you'll never open. You turn to the loaf, its surface taut and ready for the fire's embers, and knead it one last time, your hands sinking into its warmth. The Church's rules are ironclad. Once you said "I do," backed by that dowry and those vows, you're bound for life. You've heard whispers of noblewomen buying annulments with gold, but for you, a peasant with nothing but a few chickens, it's a fantasy. You think about your mother's advice to bend like a reed, and realize she was preparing you for a life with no exit. Even if your husband's cruel, the village and church will urge you to endure, not escape. The thought makes you pause, flower dusting your shift like snow. The bedchamber's brighter now, the shutters glowing with dawn's full light, and you hear your mother-in-law's voice outside, sharp as ever, ordering someone to fetch wood. You're dreading her return, her eyes scanning your bread, your face, for signs of wifely success or failure. Annulment might sound like freedom, but it's a trap. You'd lose your place, your family's honor, and any hope of a future in this village. You think about the women's advice, Agnes's warning to whisper your way with your husband, and wonder if negotiation, not escape, is your only path. Joke number 2. If annulment's a road, it's blocked by the entire village and their pitchforks, your husband's mercy last night. His quiet, "we don't have to," was a kindness, but it's also a risk. If word got out, the village would gossip, the priest might pry, and your mother-in-law would never let you forget it. You slide the loaf into the fire's embers, its heat searing your fingers, and feel the weight of a life you can't undo. The dowry, the bedding ceremony, the Church's grip, they've locked you here, with love's slow spark as your only hope. Joke number 3. If marriage is a cage, you're learning to decorate it, not break it. For now, you watch the bread bake, the thyme scent steadying you, and brace for the day. Knowing annulment's a dream you can't afford to chase. You're still by the hearth, the bedchamber's smoky warmth wrapping around you as the loaf bakes, its crust turning golden in the fire's embers. Remember that dough you shaped with the women's advice. The straw mattress in the corner is a faint shadow, its scratchy blanket long forgotten, and the thin shift clings to your flour-dusted skin. The carved wooden spoon on the hearth stands like a quiet guardian, while the thyme in your bride's bundle offers a steadying scent. The grim reality of annulment's impossibility locked behind church rules and village scrutiny sits heavy. But now, As the morning light floods the shutters, you're turning to faith. Religion, the church's iron grip that shaped your vows and fears, is also your anchor. A way to endure the marriage and its endless demands. In medieval Europe, faith was the heartbeat of daily life, especially for peasants like you, whose world from dowry meadows to childbirth was steeped in God's will. By the 14th century, the Catholic Church wasn't just a spiritual guide, it was a framework for coping with hardship, offering prayers and rituals to navigate marriages, trials. A quirky tidbit: some wives kept a prayer cord, a string of beads tucked in their apron, to count devotions for a harmonious home. Your mother's got one, and you're betting she's praying for you right now. Historians still argue whether these cords were personal devotion or just another church expectation. But as you watch the bread, you're craving any comfort faith can offer. The fire crackles, its heat stinging your hands as you shift the loaf, the smell of baking bread filling the bedchamber. You think back to the church ceremony, the priest's holy water on your head, his warnings about sin and duty. Faith got you through that day, and now it's your shield against the village's gossip, your husband's authority and the spectre of childbirth. You whisper a prayer, half remembered from Sunday Mass for strength, your voice barely audible over the fire's snap. You've seen women lean on faith, your mother kneeling at the village cross after a bad harvest, or Agnes muttering psalms while scrubbing pots. Joke number 1. If prayers fix marriages, you'll be chanting until next harvest. You glance at the bedchamber's door, where your mother-in-law's voice still carries from outside, now arguing about a stray goat. Faith teaches patience, but you're struggling with that one, especially with her looming judgment. You think about the church's promise: endure, obey, and God will reward you, maybe not in this life, but the next. It's a thin comfort when the village expects heirs and your bread's on trial, but it's something. You trace the iron ring on your finger, a symbol of vows you sealed under God's gaze, and wonder if faith can soften the edges of this life. Your husband's mercy last night, his gruff kindness, feels like a small answer to those prayers. The bedchamber's bright now, the shutters glowing with full morning light, and you pull the loaf from the embers, its crust crisp and warm. You set it on the hearth, the wooden spoon nearby, and feel a flicker of pride. Faith got you through this task, at least. You think about the women's advice, the church's rules, the dowry's weight, all tied to a God who's both judge and refuge. You've prayed for your family, for rain, for sick cows. But now you're praying for yourself, for courage, for a spark of love, for survival. Joke number 2. If God's listening, he's got a long list from this village. Your husband's boots thud outside, and you tense, expecting him or your mother-in-law to barge in. Faith says trust in God's plan, but it's hard when the plan includes a stranger and a village full of gossips. You think about the prayer cord, the holy water, the cross above the bed, all weaving faith into this marriage. They're not just rituals, they're lifelines, helping you face the hearth, the chores, the life ahead. Joke number 3. If faith moves mountains, you're hoping for a hill or two in this marriage. For now, you wrap the loaf in a cloth. The times send steadying your nerves, and lean on the quiet strength of prayer as the day's demands close in. You're still by the hearth, the bedchamber's smoky warmth fading as the fire dies down. The golden loaf, remember that bread you baked, guided by faith and women's wisdom, cooling on a cloth beside the carved wooden spoon. The straw mattress in the corner is a distant memory, its scratchy blanket abandoned, and the thin shift clings to your flower-streaked skin. The time's faint scent from your bride's bundle lingers, a quiet anchor as you lean on prayer to face this marriage's weight, dowry meadows, church vows, and village scrutiny. But now, as the morning's bustle grows louder outside, your thoughts drift to folklore, the strange tales and superstitions that fill the gaps where faith and duty leave off. These stories, whispered by the village women, shape how you see this wedding night and the life ahead. In medieval Europe, folklore was a living thread, especially for peasants like you, weaving magic and meaning into daily life alongside the church's rules. By the 14th century, tales of fairies, spirits, and charms were as real as the harvest, offering explanations for love, luck, or loss in a marriage like yours. A quirky tidbit: some villagers believed a bride should sleep with a sprig of hazel under her pillow to dream of her husband's true heart. Your mother slipped one into your hand at the feast, and it's probably lost in the bedding chaos. Historians still argue whether these tales were harmless fancy or a quiet rebellion against the church's grip. But as you sweep ash from the hearth, you're wondering what truths they hold. The fire's embers glow faintly, and you pause, the broom's bristles scratching the floorboards. You think back to the bedding ceremony, those bawdy chants laced with older, stranger undertones, hints of spirits, blessing or cursing the bed. Agnes, the frolicking neighbor, once told you a tale of a bride who forgot to leave milk for the good folk and woke to a soured marriage. You'd scoffed then, but now, in the bedchamber's quiet, you're half tempted to check the corners for unseen eyes. Joke number 1. If fairies ruin marriages, they're worse gossips than the village. The stories feel alive, they're magic, a counterpoint to the church's stern prayers. You glance at the bedchamber's door, where your husband's boots last sounded, and wonder if he knows these tales. The men at the mill probably swapped their own stories of bewitched wives or charmed crops. You think about the hazel sprig, the fertility posy, the red ribbon, all blending faith and folklore into this marriage. Your mother's voice echoes, her warning to mind the old ways alongside her prayers, and you realize she's hedged her bets, trusting both God and the unseen. The village women's tales of brides who won love by tying knots in moonlight or lost it by spilling saltfeel. Like a map, if you could just read it. You set the broom aside, the hearth clean, and feel a shiver. Not entirely from the cold. The bedchamber's bright now, morning light streaming through the shutters, and you hear your mother-in-law's sharp voice outside, scolding a child. Folklore says her kind meddling in-laws might be changelings in disguise, and you smirk at the thought. You think about the wedding night, your husband's mercy, and wonder if a tale could explain his kindness or predict his future moods. The church calls love a duty, but folklore whispers it's a spell, fragile and fickle. Joke number 2. If love's a charm, you're hoping for one that doesn't backfire. You touch the time in your shift, its scent grounding you, and feel the pull of stories that promise more than obedience. The loaf's crust crackles as it cools, and you wrap it tighter, the wooden spoon nearby like a nod to the women's tales. You think about the dowry, the vows, the villagers' eyes, all woven with folklore's thread, spirits in the fields, omens in the stars. These stories aren't just fancy, they're survival, a way to make sense of a marriage you didn't choose. You wonder if your husband's heard the one about the miller's wife who outwitted a fairy and won a golden heart. Joke number 3. If folklore's true, you're ready to bargain with a sprite for a better deal. For now, you step toward the door, the time scent steadying you, and brace for the day. carrying the village's tales as quiet armor against the unknown. You're standing by the bedchamber's door, the hearth's dying embers behind you, the golden loaf remember that bread you baked, steeped in women's wisdom and folklore, cooling on the cloth beside the carved wooden spoon. The straw mattress in the corner, with its scratchy blanket, feels like a relic of last night's chaos, and the thin shift clings to your flour-dusted skin. The time's faint scent from your bride's bundle steadies you, mingling with the memory of village tales, hazelnut sprigs, and fairy blessings that gave this marriage a flicker of magic. But now, as the morning's bustle swells outside, you're grappling with a heavier weight, legacy. This marriage, tied to the dowry meadow and church vows, isn't just about you or your husband. It's about securing a family line, a burden that feels like carrying the village's future on your shoulders. In medieval Europe, legacy was the heartbeat of marriage, especially for peasants like you, whose children ensured land like that meadows stayed in the family and labor kept the mill turning. By the 14th century, producing heirs was a social and sacred duty, with the church and village expecting you to pass on name, land, and survival itself. A quirky tidbit: some families hung a lineage cloth, a woven strip listing ancestors, above the hearth to remind couples of their duty. Your mother-in-law's got one, frayed and faded, glaring at you from the wall. Historians still argue whether these cloths were prideful displays or subtle pressures, but as you touch the door's rough wood, you feel the latter pressing down. You pause, the bedchamber's light bright with morning sun, and glance back at the loaf, its crust a small triumph. The village women's tales of brides weaving love with moonlight, not offered hope, but legacies a sterner demand. You think back to the bedding ceremony, those chants for heirs, and realize they weren't just about babies. They were about cementing the miller's name, your family's honor, the village's web. Your husband's mercy last night, his quiet "we don't have to," spared you the marriage debt. But it delays this legacy, leaving you both vulnerable to gossip. Joke number 1. If legacy's a chain, you're already tangled in its links. You step back to the hearth, checking the loaf, its warmth fading. Your mother's voice echoes, her advice to bend like a reed, but she also spoke of her own mother, who birthed 7 and buried 4, all to keep the family's name alive. Legacy isn't just children, it's the stories, the land, the mill's grind you're now part of. You think about your husband, his flour-smudged face, and wonder if he feels this weight too. He's the miller's son, expected to pass on the trade, the house, the pride. The church says it's your duty to help him, but the village will blame you if you fail. You touch the time in your shift, its scent a faint shield against the pressure. The bedchamber's door creaks as a breeze slips through, and you hear your mother-in-law outside, her voice sharp over a clucking chicken. The lineage cloth on the wall lists names you don't know, each one a ghost expecting you to deliver. You think about the dowry, the church vows, the folklore's promises, all funneling toward this: a child, a name, a future. The fear of childbirth, its blood and pain still haunts you. But legacy adds another layer, tying your body to the village's history. Joke number 2. If heirs are history, you're writing it with a quill you didn't choose. Your husband's boots crunch outside, and you tense, expecting him to enter, but the sound fades. Maybe he's back at the mill. You think about his small kindnesses, his offer to help with the fire, his nod at your bread, and wonder if legacy could bind you closer, a shared goal in this strange dance. The village women's tales hinted at love's slow spark, but legacies a colder fire burning for those yet unborn. You wrap the loaf tighter, the wooden spoon nearby, like a nod to your small victories. Joke number 3. If legacy's a tapestry, you're weaving with threads you can't see. For now, you linger by the hearth, the time's scent grounding you, and brace for the day, knowing the villagers' hopes for your line are as heavy as its stairs. You're lingering by the hearth, the bedchamber's smoky warmth fading as the fire's embers dim. The golden loaf, remember, that bread you baked, a triumph of women's wisdom, wrapped tightly on the cloth beside the carved wooden spoon. The straw mattress in the corner, with its scratchy blanket, feels like a ghost of last night's turmoil, and the thin shift clings to your flower-streaked skin. The time's faint scent from your bride's bundle steadies you, a quiet counterpoint to the weight of legacy, those heirs and lineage cloths tying you to the village's future. But now, as the morning's clamor grows outside, you're settling into a new mindset: survival. This marriage, with its dowry meadow, church vows, and village stairs, is a harsh reality, and you're learning to adapt, to find your place in its unforgiving rhythm. In medieval Europe, survival was the pulse of peasant life, especially for new wives like you, whose role managing the hearth, navigating husbands, enduring childbirth was a daily battle against scarcity and judgment. By the 14th century, women honed practical and emotional resilience, balancing church rules, village gossip, and household demands to keep their families afloat. A quirky tidbit: some wives carried a survival knot, a small cord tied with prayers or charms, tucked in their sleeve for strength. Your mother's advice to bend like a reed came with one, now knotted in your shift beside the time. Historians still argue whether these knots were spiritual aids or just tokens of grit, but as you sweep the hearth's ash, you're clinging to their promise of endurance. The fire's nearly out, and you poke the embers, the wooden spoon nearby, like a silent ally. You think back to the bedding ceremony, the village's chants, and realize survival isn't just about heirs or bread, it's about outlasting the scrutiny, the fear, the weight of expectations. Your husband's mercy last night, his quiet "we don't have to," was a lifeline, but so is your own resolve. You've seen women like Agnes laughing through hardship, or your mother haggling for the last turnip, and their strength is your blueprint. Joke number 1. If survival's a game, you're learning the rules faster than a fox in a henhouse. You glance at the bedchamber's door, where your mother-in-law's voice still carries, now scolding a neighbor's child. Her your bread, your chores, your worth looms, but you're starting to see it as a challenge, not a sentence. The church's vows, the dowry stakes, the folklore's tales, they've shaped this marriage, but survival means carving your own path within it. You think about your husband, his gruff kindness, his nod at your loaf, and wonder if he's adapting too. He's the miller's son, bound by his own pressures. And maybe you're both learning to navigate this life, step by careful step. You tie the survival knot tighter in your shift, its cord a small act of defiance. The bedchamber's bright morning sun flooding through the shutters, and you hear the village, fully awake, carts rumbling, chickens clucking, voices overlapping. You think about the women's advice, the prayer cord, the lineage cloth, all tools for surviving this world. Your fear of childbirth, your dread of gossip, they're still there, but you're building a shield, piece by piece. You've baked bread, faced the hearth, endured the night's small victories that stack like stones in a wall. Joke number 2. If life's a storm, you're not building an ark, but you've got a sturdy umbrella. You pick up the loaf, its weight, solid in your hands, and feel a quiet pride in what you've managed so far. Your husband's boots crunch outside, and you pause, bracing for his return, or your mother-in-law's next demand. Survival means facing them both, not with rebellion, but with the steady grit you're finding within. You think about the time, the survival knot, the women's tales, all weaving a net to catch you when you falter. This marriage isn't what you dreamed, but it's what you've got, and you're learning to stand in it. Joke number 3. If survival's an art, you're painting with whatever colors you can find. For now, you set the loaf down, the wooden spoon, and nod to your growing strength, and step toward the door, ready to face the day with the hard-won mindset of a woman who's starting to endure. You're stepping toward the bedchamber's door, the hearth's faint embers behind you, the golden loaf, remember, the bread you baked, a testament to your survival mindset, resting on the cloth beside the carved wooden spoon. The straw mattress in the corner, with its scratchy blanket, is a shadow of last night's weight, and the thin shift clings to your flour-dusted skin. The time's soft scent from your bride's bundle, paired with the survival knot in your shift, anchors you as you brace for the day. The village's clamor cart's voices, chickens fills the air, but now, as the morning sun streams through the shutters, you're pausing to reflect. This marriage, with its dowry meadow, church vows, and relentless pressures, has reshaped you, and you're finding your place in this world, one quiet moment at a time. In medieval Europe, reflection was rare for peasants like you, whose lives were consumed by labor and survival, yet moments of quiet by the hearth, under the star-offered space to make sense of it all. By the 14th century, women like you carried the weight of family, faith, and community, finding strength in small acts like baking bread or tying a prayer knot. A quirky tidbit: some wives marked their first day as a wife with a hearth vow, a silent promise to themselves to endure. Whispered over the fire, your loaf feels like one, though you haven't said the words aloud. Historians still argue whether these vows were common or private rituals, but as you touch the door, you're making your own unspoken pledge to keep going. The bedchamber's bright, the sun's warmth cutting through the smoky air, and you glance back at the loaf, the wooden spoon, the rumpled bed. You think about the night, your husband's mercy, the village's stares, the church's rules, and see it as a tapestry woven with fear, duty, and faint hope. The women's advice, Agnes's crow-laugh wisdom, your mother's reed-bending mantra, they've guided you here, to a doorstep where you're not just surviving, but starting to stand taller. Your husband's gruff kindness, his nod at your bread, hints at a partnership you might build, slow as a seed sprouting. Joke number 1. If marriage is a field, you're planting with cautious hands. You rest your hand on the door's rough wood, the thyme scent mingling with the faint licorice of the fertility posy under the bed. The village waits outside your mother-in-law's sharp tongue, the gossips at the well, the mills grind, but you're not the same girl who hauled water 2 days ago. You faced the bedding ceremony, the hearth, the weight of legacy, and come out stronger. Faith, folklore, the women's tales, they've all shaped this moment, where you're claiming your place, not as a pawn, but as a woman with a spark of agency. You think about the dowry, the church vows, the survival knot, and feel them knitting together into something solid, like the loaf you baked. The door creaks as you push it open, the village's sounds rushing in, children laughing, a dog barking, your mother-in-law's voice rising over it all. You step onto the threshold, the sun warm on your face, and pause, letting the moment sink in. This is your world now, the miller's house, the village's eyes, a husband you're learning to know. You're not free, not by a long shot, but you're finding ways to bend, to endure, to maybe even thrive. Joke number 2. If life's a loom, you're weaving a pattern nobody else can see. You take a deep breath, the time's scent grounding you, and step outside, ready to face the day with a quiet resolve. Your husband's at the mill, the women are waiting, and the village's rhythm pulls you forward. You think about the hearth, vow, the unspoken promise you made, and carry it like an ember in your chest. This marriage, this life, it's yours to navigate, with all its thorns and small mercies. You glance back at the bedchamber, its hearth a symbol of your first victory, and smile faintly. Joke number 3. If survival's a song, you're humming the first verse. The village stretches before you, alive and unyielding, but you're ready to walk its paths, one step at a time. As the village hum fades, let's slow down, your breath softening like a breeze through the meadow. Picture the sun climbing higher, its golden light spilling over the thatched roofs, warming the dirt paths where children chase stray chickens. You're walking now, your shift brushing your legs, the time's scent lingering like a gentle whisper. The mill's grind hums in the distance, a steady heartbeat, and you feel the world settling around you, its demands easing for just a moment. Your loaf, left on the hearth, is a small promise kept, a sign you're finding your footing in this new life. The village's eyes are still there, but they're softer now, blurred by the morning's glow, as if giving you space to breathe. Let your shoulders relax, your worries drift like smoke from the dying fire. You're here, in this moment, and it's enough. Close your eyes, let the mill's rhythm carry you, and sink into the quiet, where dreams weave gently with the days. First light. Sleep now, sweet listener, wrapped in the village's hum, safe in its embrace. Asterisk, sweet dreams.